Now, here's Michael Smerconish.
Our friend Admiral James Stavridis really is a man in full. Vice Chair, Global Affairs of the Carlyle Group, Chair of the Board of Trustees of the Rockefeller Foundation, former Dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts, and of course, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He is also a novelist. He's a best-selling author and novelist and has just published, and I have read his latest book. It is called The Restless Wave, and it's terrific. Admiral, welcome back to the program.
Wonderful to be with you. Thank you for having me on, Michael.
You did not ask me for a blurb, but I wrote one for you nonetheless. Would you like to hear it?
I would. I'm very excited. We'll put it in the electronic materials.
Stavridis combines his love of history, respect of the sea, and pride in the Navy in this fast-paced drama about a young officer thrust into World War II while trying to temper his own flaws and fulfill his leadership potential.
You nailed it, and I will gladly take that. Send me an email with that written down, and with your permission, I will include it in our electronic materials going forward.
What I so enjoyed about the book is it's one of those where you're reading it and you're saying, wait a minute, did that happen? I mean, I'm all caught up in the story of Scott Bradley James, triple threat of three first names. But there are so many things in the book, and I've not gone back. I've not gone back to say, well, did that happen? For example, can we talk about the Naval Academy class of 1941? Go ahead.
This is a class that knows war is coming. They have arrived at the Naval Academy in the late 30s. Our protagonist comes out of Key West, where he has kind of a bracing encounter with Ernest Hemingway. And at the Academy, that class of 41 knows that war is coming. It's already come by the time they're juniors at the Naval Academy. By the time they're seniors in 1940, the fall of 1940, it's so clear that there's going to be a war that for the only time in American history, the class of the Naval Academy graduates early in early 1941 and is sent to their duty stations because we know this conflict is coming.
A midshipman will not lie, cheat, or steal.
That is the honor code of the U.S. Naval Academy. It's simple in its elegance. If you violate it, you will be thrown out of the Naval Academy. And of course, in the book, there is a cheating scandal that unfolds surrounding the critical class of navigation. Our protagonist gets caught up in it. This is one of his flaws. And I'll close with this, Michael. I think that we tend to think of this greatest generation after World War II, having seen them in the throes of combat. Let's not forget, these are young men and women in their 20s. They make mistakes. They betray each other. They fail to live up to their own standards. And part of the novel, The Restless Wave, is this idea that you can overcome those flaws, work through them, and become what you ultimately are destined to be.
So was there a cheating scandal of the magnitude that you describe involving the class of 41?
No, there was not. However, there have been a handful of these cheating scandals across any number of classes, perhaps half a dozen of them over the 150 plus years of the Naval Academy. So it's woven into the DNA. And by the way, my own class of 1976 experienced one of these. So I saw it firsthand. I transposed it to 1941 for the purposes of fiction, a good story, and to make the point that people make mistakes, they fail, they can overcome them.
Fiction or nonfiction, there's an important character in your book. Help me with the pronunciation. Joe Tosic Jr.?
Joe Tosic Jr. is 100% real, a member of the class of 41, as happens in the book, and you can find this out very quickly doing the lightest touch of research. On Pearl Harbor, December 7th, he's a young ensign on a battleship. He sees the Battle of Pearl Harbor. Tragically, he's wounded. He loses a leg. Here's the punchline. Within 72 hours of losing his leg, he's back at his duty station fighting the war. It's a remarkable story, completely true, and one of the real-life characters who swim alongside the fictional ones in the novel.
And his father was an admiral who was drummed out because he had sounded the alarm about the Japanese.
Absolutely true. This was a two-star Admiral Tosic, Rear Admiral Tosic, who got cross-wired with the administration. President Roosevelt himself was frustrated and angry with his public writing and commentary, Tosic's, and effectively terminated him as a two-star. And then, of course, World War II happens. It turns out Rear Admiral Tosic is exactly right. And to its credit, the Navy then restores him to active duty. He comes back as a three-star vice admiral for the duration of the war.
When I was reading that part of the book, by the way, Admiral Stavridis' brand new book is called The Restless Wave. People who listen to this program, watch a video like this, will love it. When I was reading your discussion of Admiral Tosic, I couldn't help but think of one of the first lords of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, and some of the parallels as he was in the wilderness, as you know, in anticipation of World War II. And then very quickly, the British people realized he was right all along.
Yeah, and this is a recurring theme in war. We know this in other parts of American history. The people who are in command at the start of the war very often are not the right ones to go off and fight that war. A classic example, of course, is Abraham Lincoln's frustration, the way he had to fire general after general until he finally found his way to Ulysses S. Grant. He found his general. He found his warfighter. Similarly, in the Restless Wave, the admiral who is in command of the Pacific Fleet at the start of the war, Admiral Kimmel, is perfect. He's from Central Casting. He's 6'3", perfect silver hair. Everyone loves him. He's an elegant man, dances well. He is the wrong admiral for that war. And luckily, Ernest King, the chief of naval operations, knew Admiral Chester Nimitz well enough to make an immediate by-name call. By a week after Pearl Harbor, Admiral Chester Nimitz is on a train and then on a ship and arrives at Pearl Harbor, takes command of the broken Pacific Fleet, but he's the right admiral.
My colleague TC just said to me, this is all well and good, but is there sex and profanity in the Admiral's novel? And I assured her there is on both counts.
Indeed, there's a wonderful love triangle that's occurring here, and it's the perfect love triangle in that it's got a Navy guy, a sailor, and a Marine, a U.S. Marine. Classmates from the academy, they start out as best friends, and then, as often happens in life, a woman arrives, a beautiful Hawaiian woman named Kai, and suddenly this love triangle results in acrimony, anger, betrayal. You'll have to read the book, but TC, yes, there's some.
Rest assured, TC, relax. It's all here. Here, read the book. It's all here, please. Somebody else that I want you to speak of, I know this is true, Petty Officer Dory Miller, another character in your brand new novel.
Dory Miller is a big 6'3", 230-pound African-American from the plains of Texas who correctly perceives there's not much opportunity for African-Americans out there. He joins the U.S. Navy. Shamefully, in our Navy at this point, all he can do is become a mess cook. But he's a proud mess cook. He's a champion of the boxing matches of the Pacific Fleet. On Pearl Harbor, on that fateful day, his duty station is down in the wardroom to cook meals. He hears the firing. He knows he knows where to go. He follows the sound of the guns to the bridge. He sees his captain grievously wounded. He saves his captain, and then he himself mans an anti-aircraft gun and shoots down at least one, if not two, Japanese Zeros. They asked him afterward, Dory, how'd you learn to shoot an anti-aircraft gun? And he said, hey, it's just like shooting ducks. You got to shoot out ahead of where they're going. Shoots down two of them. If you see the movie, which I highly recommend, Pearl Harbor, he's played by Cuba Gooding Jr. in an Oscar-worthy turn. And here's the punchline, Michael. He gets the Navy Cross. He would have gotten the Medal of Honor, but he was a black guy in a white man's world at that point. He gets the Navy Cross. It's pinned on by Chester Nimitz himself. Unfortunately, tragically, a month later, Dory Miller dies in the sinking of a U.S. carrier. But here's the final punchline. The next U.S. Navy nuclear-powered, 100,000-ton, 80 combat aircraft carriers, like USS Lincoln, USS Nimitz, USS Theodore Roosevelt. The next one, USS Dory Miller.
I got the hair standing up on my arms. The hair is standing up on my arms as you tell that story. So, Admiral,
it is remarkable.
Talk to me about your approach, because obviously a lot of the stories that are in the book and a lot of the figures that are in the book, you're a student of history, a very accomplished individual yourself. You wanted to tell those stories, and you wanted to tell them in the context of a novel. How come? You could have written another book on naval history, but you chose to do it in this style. Why did you do that?
Three big reasons. One is it's just fun to write fiction. And once you're a fiction writer and a damn good one. When you're locked up in that straitjacket of fact, you've got to get those facts right, because history will be fact-checking you. So you're in a kind of a straitjacket. You get to throw that off and really throw some paint around the screen, and you get to change the class of 41 and make it a class that did have a cheating scandal. So you break the shackles of nonfiction. Secondly, more importantly, people love stories. And above all, they love stories of others. A book very much in my mind, I'm sure you read it some years ago, is The Winds of War by Herman Wouk. That's a big, thick doorstopper, 2 volumes, 1,000 pages. This is not that book. I wanted something smaller, more manageable, more human dimension, but I wanted to tell stories. And then third and finally, you mentioned Churchill a few moments ago. Churchill famously said, the further into the future you want to see, the more you must look to the past, meaning the lessons of the past are what are going to inform our decisions going forward. Fiction helps because it reaches a much bigger audience. That's the third reason.
I learned a great deal about Navy culture in reading your book. This is now a lightning round. I'm going to say things and you're going to define them, okay? That I gleaned from the Restless Wave. Reef points.
Reef points are little things on a sail that tell you where the wind is blowing so you can effectively steer better. And reef points are also a small little book, a Bible that each midshipman is given when he or she arrives at the academy with all of the knowledge of the Navy packed into its small frame.
You don't have to do this for me, but explain what I mean when I ask, how long have you been in the Navy?
It's a saying that each midshipman is required to memorize, and it begins, "All my blooming life, sir," and walks through some pretty colorful language that basically says, I've been in the Navy forever and I'll always be in the Navy.
Next, the origin of the expression, "I'll have a cup of Joe."
A cup of Joe, which of course means a cup of coffee in today's vernacular. I often appear on a show called Morning Joe, but it's also the name of Josephus Daniels, who was the Secretary of the Navy during Prohibition. And during Prohibition, the U.S. Navy stopped having alcohol on its ships. That was a near mutiny because sailors loved their daily ration of grog, rum, came to us from the British Royal Navy. So during Prohibition, we had no alcohol in our ships. After Prohibition, when all the sailors thought, okay, here comes our rum ration again, Josephus Daniels said, nope, we're going to keep a dry Navy. That's when sailors would drink coffee and say it's a cup of joe, mocking Josephus Daniels.
And I also learned from you in the Restless Wave that happy hour was invented by the Navy during the Great War. Something else I did not know. By the way, I'm surprised if the Army doesn't take credit for it. Let me keep going. A shiny silver dollar needs to be bestowed upon who?
The first individual who salutes you after you receive a commission. Famous scene in the film, An Officer and a Gentleman. At the very end of that film, the character who finally gets his commission is saluted by the black drill sergeant. Lou Gossett Jr. plays him, and he is saluted, and he bestows upon him a silver dollar.
When you report to a new ship, a dress uniform is expected and required.
And that remains a tradition today. All these things, by the way, are still with us today. The Navy never changes. Winston Churchill said, he was so frustrated with the traditions of the Navy, and he mocked them, saying, I'll give you the traditions of the Navy: rum, buggery, and the laugh. He kind of had his tongue firmly in his cheek there. But we are a very traditional service, much more than the others. And yes, you better be wearing your dress blues when you show up on the quarterdeck of a ship for the first time.
I still don't know the proper way to describe each side or the front or the back of a boat. I'm such a knucklehead and neophyte. But do tell me, what does Times Square mean to you?
It's first and foremost a place in New York, obviously, where sailors grabbed and kissed women upon Victory Day. But you're thinking of it in the context of on our battleships, our enormous battleships, which, Michael, have a bow and a stern and a port and a starboard. But right in the middle, where those lines come together, we call it Times Square. And that's where the sailors would run to and from when general quarters were sounded, for example, on 7 December 1941.
And finally, I offer you Bravo Zulu. Zulu.
Bravo Zulu is a traditional flag hoist. We have little flags that indicate each of the letters in the alphabet. When a Navy ship hoists Bravo Zulu, or a sailor says to another Bravo Zulu, it means well done.
Okay, and that's what I say to you for Restless Wave. Admiral, the book's terrific. My audience will love it. Thank you for writing it.
And thank you for having me on. And TC, you're going to really like page 47.
Thank you, Admiral. There you go.
Bye, everybody.
See ya. Thank you. That was terrific.